Welcome to See Beneath Your Beautiful, where guests share stories of adversity and perseverance, which inspire, encourage, and challenge us. We embrace these tough conversations, intimately exploring our loves, fears, and hopes with a delicious combination of depth and lightness.
Hi, my name is Jessica Bonar. Very important you spell my last name and pronounce it correctly. It's Bonar. It sounds like fancy French instead of very close to a dirty word.
That's awesome.
I have a son in middle school right now. It's a tough last name.
Oh, yeah. Oh, well, Can I tell you that I married my husband and didn't take his last name because it's Smelzer? And I said, I love you very much, but I do not love your last name. And no, I'm not taking it. So.
Well, it's worked out. I started as a Roberts. That's my maiden name. And so now I'm just in a different spot on like the potluck assignments. You know, I used to have to bring a dessert and now I get to bring an appetizer because I'm a B.
Oh, that's funny. And how old is your son?
I have a 13-year-old and a 20-year-old turning 21 next week.
Awesome. They both have your last name. I'm not even going to say it.
They do. Bonar. It's like a pirate. Bonar.
Oh, Bonar. Okay, thanks. Because now I got stuck in my head with the other one. Are you in a relationship right now?
I'm not. Mm-hmm. I am single and not ready to mingle. I am 43. I'm divorced twice, and I have dated some people intentionally and seriously since my divorce about 2.5 years ago, but I put myself in timeout.
Yeah.
The last breakup was a hard one. And so I think I just need a hot second, you know?
Yeah. I was married once before, and then I had 13 years of terrible dating. And then I put myself in a timeout, and it lasted about 8 months. And then I met my husband, who I totally adore. The timeout really helped because it helped me figure out what I wanted and what I deserved.
I hear that because I took a really intentional space in the last few weeks, actually. And one of the things was trying to understand some of the source of kind of recycled behavior and recycled mindset and things like that. And one of the things that I found is I've always had a desire to be with someone, to share my life with somebody. And like today's words, you know, like I want my ride or die and I want my person or whatever. But what I discovered in doing some introspection was that, but like why? And so I have been very intentional each time I've gone through something difficult to really honor my feelings and really work to become whole. That's my hope. And what I discovered was that I have been trying to become whole so that I could find someone, so that I could share my life with somebody. And I knew how important it was to be whole when I was in pursuit of that, so that I don't need someone to fill a void and fill a hole. And there was a lot of prayer and meditation around that. Mm-hmm. And now I currently am sitting in this desire that I just want to be whole, period. You know, no ...
Yeah.
There's no so that. I just want to be whole. I want to be very intentional about living the life that I pick, that I choose, that I select in my hobbies or my actions and my career. I've been so willing historically to like kind of throw that away for like, what adventure do you want to take me on, man of my dreams? I will get on your white horse. Let's go. And I had to try to understand, why was I so willing to kind of dispose of the life that I currently lead, which is rad.
Yeah.
That was the thing. I don't need to be rescued, but I still have a desire to be rescued. And I had to figure out what that was about. I lived an amazing life. I live a beautiful life. I didn't always, but I do now. And so then it was like, why am I willing to give that up? Because I wanted so much that was always the goal to find someone.
Yeah.
And now that's not my goal. And that's new.
Yeah.
Some people are like, you know, that may happen and you'll never know. It's just when you stop looking. And I'm like, cool, or not.
I read a book once called Wild at Heart. It's a Christian-based book about what men want. But then there was a book written by the wife called Captivating about what women want. And I found that book, I don't know if you've read it, was so true about wanting to be part of an adventure. Even though we want our own hobbies and we want our own life and we are whole, we still want to be part of somebody's desire and constantly being sought after. And I think that's okay, even in a relationship, even knowing who you are, to still always want your partner to be captivated by you and pursuing you.
Absolutely. My friend at work has a desk thing that says strong, independent woman. And so people are like, oh, you're a strong, independent woman. That's just like super attractive. Of like, first of all, that scares most men right off, because they think it seems cool. And then they get close and they're like, oh God, just kidding. There's this real thing of like, I don't need you.
Mm-hmm.
So it becomes a choice. Like, I want you.
Right.
That has been off-putting for some. But what I also found was there's this attraction to some, and that I am that strong, independent woman. And there's, an aspect of fierce and I'm going to get this. And she's out there doing her thing. But what I subconsciously was willing to do was diminish that in order to fit into their box of who I was, am, could be, should be, etc. And so I noticed in this last relationship in the last like 6 weeks prior to it ending, that I was all of a sudden conscious of this subconscious response I had to just kind of like make myself small and diminish myself and not really speak up. And I don't mean to like not be combative and have a debate. I just mean to even like throw my opinion out there about something, especially if it wasn't in alignment with my very kind. He's a very good human, great human. He's just not my human.
Right.
That's why there was this kind of reckoning that I felt like I needed to do for myself after all this. And, I'd say, when I say I'm 43 and divorced twice, that sounds terrible. That sounds bad. Or it felt that way for a really long time. And some people are like, oh, so-and-so's getting married for the third time. I'm like, hey, no judgment.
Right.
They're giving it a shot. God bless them.
Right.
My first marriage ended really abruptly. And my mom was kind of like, this is like a Lifetime movie where the woman gets shit on. And then, eventually it gets better. I was like, well, I'm waiting for that part.
Yeah.
It was very like high drama and abrupt. And then I was single for a period of time and met my second husband and fell in love. And he adopted my son from my first husband. And so then it was funny when you said, do we all have the same last name? Yes, now. And now my son's like, why did you do that? My oldest like, why'd that happen?
Yeah.
But I had to look at this pattern of it's one thing to compromise and it's another thing to pivot and it's another thing to pull yourself up by your bootstraps and life throws you stuff. And I get that. But there is a period of time in which there's enough of those pivots that you diminish yourself enough, you make yourself small enough that you go out into the world and everybody sees that strong, independent woman and everybody sees that big, amazing human. And then you go home and you climb into your box. And I really recognized that just this last go and really had to ask myself some intentional questions about why and what do I want it to look like that's different in myself, regardless of relationship.
How do you know to do that? I just finished 6 months of coaching and I just hired somebody else that I resonated with after hearing her speak. We were talking about the subconscious and you mentioned that. How do you do that on your own? Or do you have somebody helping you? Or what do you do? Do you have a practice? How are you growing?
Oh, that's a great question. How are you growing? I think that over the course of time, I've done a variety of things. I've absolutely had therapists and counselors that were pivotal in me finding wellness and wholeness. I think the biggest thing for me has been when my marriage to my first husband ended so abruptly. There was a real need. Like I pulled myself up by my bootstraps because my thing was like, my son and I are not going to be screwed because, this happened. And like, I'm not going to go sit in the corner and in the closet and cry for the next 3 weeks. And so I did. So I pulled myself up my bootstraps and I made stuff happen. And it was 5 years later that somebody reached out to me that was connected to that person, to my ex-husband, and reached out to me to have a quick conversation with me, like via Facebook Messenger. And it ruined me. All of a sudden, I had all of these feelings and all these emotions and all of these everything that the deal was, I thought I had processed them, but I thought I had dealt with them, but I hadn't felt them. I knew they were there. And so I'd identified them. So I thought I had dealt with them, but I hadn't felt it.
Okay.
And I think in that moment, that's when I realized I need to do a substantially better job of honoring my feelings. That changed the trajectory of what personal growth looked like for me, that I needed to have ugly feelings
Yeah.
because I'll start to cry and I'll start to ugly cry, but I'll only give myself like 30 seconds. And then I'm like, okay, clean it up, girl. And the reality is that's not okay, that I put a time limit on my ugly cry and that I get to be angry, like ugly, just angry, which then therefore allows me to open the drain so some of it can drain out.
Mm-hmm.
I think that was a pivotal moment for me. I do a lot of prayer and meditation. I'm not necessarily in the context of a religion, just with a personal relationship with my higher power.
Yeah.
As somebody said a long time ago, prayer and meditation, prayer is when I talk to my higher power, and then meditation is when I'm listening.
Oh, nice. I love that.
Right. Because there's that like quiet your mind and my mind can't shut up. And then, but if I know that I'm trying to open myself up to this understanding or relationship with my higher power, that there's something beautiful about that. And then I have a couple of mentors. I have a couple of people that I call and I tell the whole truth and nothing but the truth. So help me God. I tell them all my ugly stuff and all the things that make me look like a terrible, awful, judgmental, angry. I'm totally going to hell for this person. And you have to have those people in your life.
Yeah.
100%. They're not just the people I tell that stuff to, but then they're the people who have a response. I don't need yes men in my life. I need truth and I need honesty. I don't need brutal honesty. I don't believe anybody needs that.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody needs brutal honesty, but I need honesty. So I need people that are going to call me on my shit.
Yeah.
I need someone that's going to go, hey, isn't this what you were looking for? And you're like, buddy.
Yeah, exactly.
So I think it's a combination of all of those things, right? Outside help and understanding that on the daily to be able to take some sort of personal inventory. A lot of that for me comes from recovery as well. I'm in recovery and I started some of those before I got sober, but now they are more infused into my daily life.
Yeah. And you're 10 years sober, is that right?
I am. Yeah.
That's awesome. Congratulations.
Thank you. Absolutely 100% hardest thing I've ever done. I've done a lot of hard stuff here. Hara. You posted about that on Facebook about everybody having different.
But then somebody did leave me a voicemail and said it wrong and it just cracked me up. And he said, oh, and I know I got it right. I had a coach not very long ago, I'm sad to say, that would ask me how I feel and actually had to send a list of feeling words because I didn't know how I felt, getting in touch with those feelings. I think you're right. And I hope with, all the work I'm going to do that I can get in touch with the feelings and acknowledge them and not just say, okay, I've acknowledged the situation, but how did it make me feel? And then maybe at some point be the mature, sophisticated woman I know I'm destined to be instead of the young girl who, stamping her foot.
Oh, yeah. Oh, listen, I can toddler like the best of them for sure. I hear that about identifying your feelings. My last therapist, who was just a goddess, in my opinion, I'm a doer, right? And so she's like, you're a doer, not just a fixer, but like, let's make a decision and let's go, right? In the Strengths Finder, it makes me an activator. Like, okay, here we go. Let's go. Well, put your shoes on in the car. Let's go. But she said, the problem is that you do not pause to feel those feelings before you find a solution and then try to enact the solution. And so she gave me this exercise, which I strongly recommend to anybody listening. There's a moment where you're like, ugh. For me, it's fear usually comes up. Fear is a strong, strong emotion and will disillusion you in a lot of ways, right? So I have this fear come up and I have to identify it like, oh, I have fear. Okay. After I've identified that I have it, I have to name it and I have to say it out loud. So I'm afraid of this. So like when I meet somebody, then I'm like, oh, I could fall in love with you. Well, that's terrifying because I'm afraid I'm getting my heart broken. I'm afraid of this. I'm afraid I'm going to be a fool. I'm afraid tomorrow he's going to be like, hey, I feel like I made a mistake kissing you, whatever.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
But I have to say it all out loud. And I have to sit in those feelings that I have identified for 3 minutes.
Mm.
And I'm not allowed to think of any solutions or any fixes or any next steps for 3 minutes. I want you to know that that's the longest 3 minutes of your life, especially the first several times you do it. But the first several times I did it, that I was like, okay, identify it. I have this feeling. Okay, name it, name all the things. And now I have to just sit in it. I had to just feel it. I had to cry the ugly cry. I had to be angry. I had to be whatever it was, right? And then after 3 minutes, of which I have to set a timer because, I'm like, because the activator in me is like, and here we go. Come on, moving along. And then after 3 minutes, I'm allowed to start using my problem solving skills of what does that mean? And it doesn't matter. I gave it a shot. At least I gave a little bit of try, or whatever. But that process has taken so much power out of the intangible, immovable, not even real, all the different possibilities that I always think of and fear. And then you live through them all emotionally. And then none of them actually happen because a different version happens. And so now you felt 6 different ways of that. I get to eliminate so much of that.
That's awesome.
Because I do it in that 3-minute period. So I would strongly recommend that. I'm sure it's probably like cognitive behavioral health 101, but it was life-changing.
I love that. Tell me about what you do professionally. Besides what you do for your day job, you also are a speaker. Tell me about some of the topics that you speak about.
So I did this thing a few years back and we got to develop our purpose statement. And my purpose statement is that I must inspire people with simple solutions to complex problems that'll change their life. When you can find those moments in whatever area of your life, whether it's personal, professional, relational, etc., that's when I feel like so fueled. Those are the moments when people are like, I'm living out my passion. I'm totally doing that thing where it's like, if I would travel and speak, and the world was perfect and all the planets were aligned, and that was the only thing I did, I would feel fulfilled every day of my life. For my day job, I work in insurance. I was the Medicare specialist in our office for a long time, and I love it because I found a way to simplify the front end of explaining Medicare to someone in a way that they felt empowered to actually make a decision for themselves. In order for me to feel fulfilled, like I am actually living out the purpose for which I have been given the gifts that I currently have, that I was born with and that I've developed, I must do these things. The rest of the time is gravy. And there's lots of fun and laughter, but that's when somebody who feels like they have a file box full of all these pamphlets from AARP and everybody else on the planet that has sent them stuff. And I can say, let's talk about this. And in an hour, they walk out feeling like they can make a decision for themselves. That's powerful,
awesome.
Right?
Yeah.
So when I get to do public speaking, I've spoken on several focuses. I've spoken several times to different business communities. So Chamber of Commerce, like where there's, 300 people at a Chamber of Commerce breakfast, or Executive Women International, where we're talking about leadership. And I have a talk that it's the 5 things I must have and the 5 things I must do in leadership. And really with the context of, some people are like, well, I wasn't really born with those skills. So, and the reality is many of us are in a role of leadership, although we were not born with leadership skills. So there is an absolute requirement for us to seek out what it means to be a good leader and what I can and need to do in order to lead well. So people who immediately disqualify themselves from leadership development because they don't feel like a leader, but they are a leader. They are a leader in their workplace, in their community, in their family. I also do something broader in terms of compelling presentations worth listening to. That fuels me because these complex problems people think about how do, I get so nervous about speaking and this and that, and simple solutions to your complex problem. It'll change your life. The most powerful one though that I get to do is when I get to talk about personal stuff. I have been through some shit. There's lots of different kinds of misery and a lot of it is self-made misery. And I get to own that. I have a talk I did called The Pit. It was someone who said, if you only had 15 minutes left on the planet, what would you say? What do you need the world to know? I said, that there's a good life and it's available to you. today, regardless of who you've been or what you've done. It does not matter. I do not care. There is a good life and it's available to you today. You can change your mind and change your direction. And today can be the day that you can look yourself in the mirror and start to smile back at that person, that you can be whoever you always wanted to be. And it's absolutely available. There is no expiration date on that opportunity. I've been to the pit of despair.
I want to know what the pit was or what some of the problems were or what you faced, because, at the moment you seem bubbly and 10 years sober. And so I don't know what pit you're referring to, and I'd like to know.
Yeah, great question. So I've been to the pit a few times because I'm a slow learner, where you kind of find yourself, like I said, recycled behavior. You find yourself back in this pit where you're like, this seems familiar. Have they changed the wallpaper? Because this looks familiar. There's financial pits and marital pits and professional pits and mental and behavioral health pits and like depressive pits. And for me, there are 2 times that I can tell you that I was absolutely there. And I've been able to apply some of those principles. Other times where I'm like, oh, I feel myself sliding back into a familiar hole. I was a absolute terrible 100% meth addict.
Mm-hmm.
I found myself in this pit of incredible addiction, and meth was my vice. Although I was not super selective and I was willing to participate in several. I'm like, oh, what do you have? Cool. Let's do that too.
Yeah.
And I got to the point that I fell in love with this boy in Vegas, and I moved to Vegas, and it's everything terrible that comes to mind when you're like, oh, that sounds bad. That sounds like a bad trajectory. Yeah, it's all that.
Yeah.
And then it's worse. I just, lived in like a flop house with 6 other people, and we were excited, but I found out I was pregnant. So I was standing in the driveway, and I just finished a cigarette, which was my last cigarette for a long time. But I looked at the love of my life at that time, and I said out loud, if I'm going to be in charge of teaching someone how to be a good person, I should probably start being one. And so that was a pivotal moment for me. And you would think, having been that far down and that deep down, that you'd never go back. You'd absolutely never go back to anything that remotely looked like that. But what I found was 10 years later, I found myself in an absolute alcoholic pit of despair.
Yeah.
It was a long, slow dip. I didn't immediately just crazy bottom out. And I'm what they refer to as a high bottom drunk. It means I didn't lose my house, and I didn't lose my car. I didn't lose my job. I didn't lose my kids. So I didn't lose all the material things, right? And what I did lose was my soul.
Mm-hmm.
And I do mean this. I lost the desire to live.
Yeah.
I sat in the bathroom and I thought about killing myself, because I just I couldn't live like that one more day. I didn't know how to live, but I thought oh my God, I have 2 kids. At that point now I had 2. And I thought, I don't want them to grow up with a mom that's killed herself. I've screwed them up already enough. There was a 2-week period from that moment in the bathroom, and I can close my eyes and I can tell you what the entire bathroom was like, because I remember what,
Yeah.
And there was a 2-week period before I started to go to a 12-step program. And that was the hardest 2 weeks, because I knew that I couldn't die, but I didn't want to live, and I didn't know how to. I felt so much shame because I had everything the whole world ever told me I was supposed to have that was supposed to make me happy. And I wanted to die. And that made me feel even worse. People pray for this life. The craziest thing was my youngest and I were just talking 2 days ago. There was a tragedy where somebody famous had completed suicide. And my son said, she is beautiful. So what the heck? And I said, our external appearance has absolutely no bearing on our mental and emotional well-being.
Mm-hmm.
That was a huge thing to have to learn. It's taken me a long time because I had the whole deal, right?
Yeah.
I had the house and the job and the kids and 2 dogs and the car in the driveway. And it wasn't a Mercedes, but it was a car, and it started every time I asked it to. So I had everything that was supposed to make me happy, and I wanted to die.
Are you still judging yourself about that?
No, finally.
It sounds like you're judging yourself that you've gone through 2 marriages, and it's not matter of fact. You've had 2 marriages. They both failed, whatever. Do you hear it now that I say it?
I do. And I appreciate you calling it out. Everything is progress, not perfection, if you will.
Yeah.
And so I would say for most things, I'm above 90% of acceptance and understanding. I think sometimes I just want to honor what other people are thinking, or other reactions that people have had and shared with me, where I'm like, I know I'm 43 and divorced twice. Like, holy crap, stay away from her. What is she doing?
People have said that to you?
Yeah. People have said that's what they think when they hear of someone. And then we talk about that's me. And then that changes actually kind of how they look and think about and see people who have done that. Even just kind of breaking that divorce mold too. Like people post on Facebook, marriage is hard and it's lots of work and you have to be willing to this and that, which is totally true. But there is this inference that means that people who got divorced didn't try. And people have talked about people are willing to quit too soon and people aren't willing to be committed and we've had that dialogue.
I see.
And I've had that dialogue with people. And so when we talk about, hey, here's what I experienced and here's what I went through. And my second marriage was 12 years and here's what that looked like. And that changes, I think, people's judgment of others.
Yeah, I would think so.
What I'm okay with now is that I don't have any doubt that what I have done is who made me who I am. I had a friend say, so do you have any regrets? And I go, oh, of course I have a fuck ton of regrets, but I don't have any doubt that I've made the right decision or that I've done the right thing, whether it's divorce or sobriety, or that I am absolutely putting my best foot forward as an employer, as a friend, as a parent, etc. I don't question my intentions like I used to, because my intentions were so foul. If you met 20 years ago, Jessica.
Yeah.
And they really were selfish and self-centered and truly kind of a foul soul. So I have a confidence that all of my experiences, all of my pain was absolutely necessary, although I wouldn't recommend it.
Totally.
It's why I am who I am, but I certainly don't wish that on my children.
Yeah.
How about not a long meandering path to happiness? Let's take a shorter, more direct route.
It just caught me off guard because I'm divorced and so happily divorced because he was not the right person for me. My current husband, I'm his third wife. My mother was married 5 times. If I had married every man I ever dated, I would have been married 100 times. You just happened to marry a couple of the guys you dated and that didn't work out. For me, there's no judgment. And as a matter of fact, in my worldview, I respect somebody who understands that it's sometimes the better choice to not stay in a marriage, because I wasn't showing my children. I was with my first husband for 12 years and it was such a toxic relationship. I wasn't showing them what love looked like at all.
Right.
That was a real surprise that is something people actually think.
Yeah. Some of it is probably innate or foundational for me. I mean, my parents are still married. So my parents are having, I hope I'm doing this math right. It's their 50th wedding anniversary this August.
Wonderful.
So it's amazing and incredible. And my brother and his wife have been together for almost 25 years. No one has ever made me feel this way. This is my personal choice, or it's subconscious or not, that I felt like the black sheep. I felt like the failure. I felt like the one that, didn't measure up or whatever, right? They've all just loved me. They've loved me when I was unlovable. Truly. I think that's probably part of it.
Yeah.
So that's where I'll go with 90%.
Yeah.
A lot less personal condemnation or self-condemnation than I used to have. And a lot more just trying to honor that it is my reality, regardless of whether it could have been different or better or whatever, that all the could haves have already passed and they're not available.
In the talk that you give, you have reached the pit of despair a number of times. How do you get out, and what lessons can you offer anybody to how to get out of when you're at that depth?
I like analogies. I like stories. I like metaphors. when I was a kid, my dad, when I would get in trouble, which was kind of a lot, my dad would use analogies to explain like why this is a bad thing that you did. And I'd be like, cool, I get it. And then he would use another one and I'd be like, I get it. And then he'd use a third one. I'm like, I get it. And now I use it. And now I do it all the freaking time. And everyone's like, she has the best analogies. And I was like, right, because I was in trouble all the time. But I use it in the pit. I talk about it being like, I've got kind of like MapQuest directions on how to get out. And so I'm in the pit and I need a co-pilot. And I mean an actual person. Like for me, a divine relationship has been essential. But for this specific thing, I mean like an actual person. And it needs to be a person that's been to the pit so that they can help you get out. And a co-pilot being someone who doesn't do it for you.
Yeah.
They help you and guide you, but they're not going to grab the steering wheel. This is not like a student driver moment where they both have a steering wheel. No, you're the only one with a steering wheel and gas pedal. And then opportunities to check your mirrors. You got to check your rear view and figure out how you got there. You've got to check your blind spots. Before I pull out into traffic, I have to turn over and check my blind spots and identifying some of your blind spots, because if not, you're going to crash hard. And then looking through your windshield, and it's a windshield opportunity to figure out where am I going? Sometimes we're so desperate to run away from something and we're motivated by that pain and suffering that we are not consciously choosing where we're going to. So a real intention about where we're headed. But I don't mean like, this is the job I want. I mean foundational stuff, not functional stuff. So who do I want to be when I get there? And what does that look like as my windshield goal? Like I said, 25 years ago, me, like, I want to be a woman of grace and dignity. I want to be a friend that is trustworthy, that if I say I'm going to be somewhere, I am. And I want to be a woman that can look herself in the mirror and smile back, because I didn't have those things. Those were things I thought had an expiration date for me. So we get this kind of roadmap to be able to get out. And then we have an opportunity to do, like we talked about way earlier, was kind of this daily self-inventory and intentional growth. When you said, what are you doing to grow? That keeps us consciously aware, so that if I even take one sidestep towards thoughts and behaviors that could lead me back down that path, I can recognize them substantially sooner because I'm doing a daily inventory. And by that, I mean like, what did I do well today? Because that is important. We're all like, what did I suck at? What do I need to do better? And my to-do list is always things I need to accomplish. And there needs to be a mental list at the end of the day of things I did well.
Yeah.
I helped so-and-so. I did this. I made a healthy choice. I went for a walk. Whatever. But I just used to walk around with a list of all the ways I sucked in my head.
Yeah.
And there has to be a way to counterbalance your inner critic.
Right. I love that. I just want to share with you that 25 years ago, I was also not a woman I was proud of. And it is a journey. My mother passed away when I was 18 and I was lost in the world, and I was very promiscuous looking for love. And at this point, it is just what it was. But for many years, it was very shame-filled of the countless times I thought somebody would fall in love with me based on having sex with me is ridiculous. I just want to share with you that we grow.
Yes. And I love that.
Yeah.
And I get it. I was absolutely 100% that girl. And I thought that sex was love.
I did. Yeah.
And so I thought if you had sex with me, it meant you loved me.
I thought so too.
And that all those smooshy, glowy feelings that you feel, that I thought that was love too.
Yeah.
But what happened was I've learned slowly that if those feelings don't follow you outside the bubble into the real world, into your functional life, then that's not love.
Right. My husband, out of all the men I have ever dated from 15 on, although I would have to say my first love was very, very kind and sweet. But other than him, maybe the fifth guy who I was engaged to for a bit, he was very sweet. But the rest of them were, nobody was kind and thought of me first. And now I know that this is what love is. My husband is so generous The other day, I came home from getting groceries and he met me in the garage to help me bring them up without me asking. That's what love is. This overwhelming kindness.
Right.
That he wants to do for me.
Now, let me ask you this. So people talk about love languages, right? Mm-hmm. And when we look at the 5 love languages, this is the one that makes me feel loved, right? Or the 1 or 2. But what I've asked some people in return is, what is your love language when you are giving love? Because they're not always the same. Like physical touch could be when I feel the most loved, but I've found that acts of service is how I express love.
I see. Yes. Yes.
When I hear that about your husband, that's an act of service, and like acts of service make me feel loved. But what is your primary love language when you are giving love?
Well, because of him, I know what it is. It's words of affirmation. I know how he feels loved.
Got it.
It's because of him that I know what that love language is. Because I don't think in general, that's my love language. I don't think I'm often easy with words of affirmation, but with him, I am, because I know that's what builds him up. And I want to love him as much as he loves me. It's eureka, this relationship after so many years.
It sounds magical.
Yeah, it's pretty good.
I'm so glad you found it.
Oh, thank you. Oh my gosh. I have paid my dues though.
Right. My friend says, I have kissed a lot of frogs. That is for sure.
I have kissed many frogs. I have done an episode where I have interviewed 12 women who have lost their mothers in death. Mm. And I've also talked to many other women who have no relationship with their mothers. And it makes me sad, but also it's interesting. And, I don't have a mom to know what it would be like as a grown woman if I would have a relationship.
Right.
I just had a lifetime of longing.
Right.
But we did a photo shoot and I asked you to think of somebody who you love when you look in the lens to get some real emotion from you. And you just beamed when you talked about your mom. I'm choked up and I don't even know why.
I've never even met that lady.
I just love mom stories. And so I just want to know what your relationship with your mom is like. Something about your mom.
So my relationship with my mom today is incredible. If someone says, you're going to grow up and be like your mother, I'm like, oh, thank God. She is fierce in a way that is inspiring. She's always pursuing greatness. And what's beautiful is I don't even think she realizes it. Mm-hmm. She has no idea that the things that come out of her mouth, you will carry them with you. My oldest was talking about that, and grandma said that. And so, I knew I needed to listen.
Awesome.
So my mom is one of my absolute best friends. And I think the beautiful thing is that it hasn't always been that way. And that's part of why it's so insane today. When I was a little kid, I had a good relationship with both parents. I have one brother and I was kind of like daddy's girl. I spent some time as a teenager and early young adult just in some incredibly selfish and self-centered and disrespectful. And there was a time that I had made enough bad decisions in a row that my dad pretty much disowned me. He was like, I'm done. I'm done with you. I'm done with your BS. And here's the deal. I deserved that 100%. And my mom said, well, that doesn't work for me because she's my only daughter. And my mom was so intentional in maintaining a relationship with me. I'd run off to Vegas because I'd fallen in love with this boy who lived there. I'm not just to get married, but just like to, Mm-hmm. And she still would make sure she knew the phone number of where I was. She still would call me and ask me how I was doing. She would come out and visit. I got pregnant and my parents said they would help us get married because we loved each other and they would help us get married. It's only because my mom insisted that I not fall off the map. Mm-hmm. She didn't have a great relationship with her mom and she wasn't going to let history repeat itself. And that became an incredible turning point for us, that I could look at her and say, I'm so, so sorry. I'm so sorry for all the pain I've caused you and all the things I can only imagine as a parent and as someone who loves somebody, as deeply as she clearly loves me. And she knew that I was worth loving. And she knew that she wanted me in her life, even if I wasn't the best version of me. Even though I was the worst version of me, she still wouldn't quit on me. And I know that now in my soul. So she's absolutely one of my best friends in the whole world. And we talk and we laugh and we complain and we bitch and moan and we do all the things you do with a girlfriend,
Yeah.
We get to do that together. It's an absolute gift. An absolute gift.
I have learned to love myself because I have daughters, and I see that I love them no matter what. And I was somebody's daughter once, even though I don't have a mom still, and I deserve that love also. And I deserve to give it to myself. Do you love the unlovable version of you?
Oh, no. But in the spirit of having less self-condemnation, I don't hate her anymore. I used to hate her. And I would say candidly, I tolerate her now, but I don't love her.
I hope you get there.
Yeah, me too.
This was so beautiful. Thank you for sharing your heart with me.
Thank you. Thanks for letting me laugh and cry, because it's what I do.
Me too. Me too. I got choked up asking about your mother. I didn't even know where you were going. I don't know anything about her. Moms in general choke me up.
Right.
The tragedy of losing them and having them and not loving them and missing them. And I have 2 daughters, and I think all the time, you're so lucky to have me. They don't obviously think that. They don't know how lucky they are.
I mean, not every waking moment.
I guess if I had to write a purpose statement, it is that we don't waste a minute, and we remember that we're going to die someday, and to remember to love each other and not wait to the deathbed to say all the things you meant to say.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Open your mouth and say the things. Just make sure that you can say them with love.
I totally hear you. Yeah. I love that you said that about brutal honesty, because I think you can be honest and kind, and you don't have to be brutal. So thank you for that.
Yeah, you bet.
I hear people say, well, I'm just honest, but if it's not helpful, you can keep your mouth shut also. You can have your thoughts and not share them.
So that's the trifecta that I learned. Is it the truth? Does it need to be said? And can it be said with love? And usually the last one is the one that means that I can't say it out loud. Because is it the truth? Yeah, he screwed up, she screwed up, whatever. And does it need to be said? Yes, because that mistake needs to not be made again because of XYZ. Can it be said with love? Ooh. I'm going to have to hold off for a couple of days until I can find a loving way to say that, because that's when progress is made. That's when relationships are formed. And that's when we can maintain self-love and self-respect.
Yeah.
When we're just honest, or especially brutally honest, I think we lose that connection with our inner self as well. And so we lose the ability to have that self-love and self-respect, because we know that we caused pain or damage or wreckage.
Yeah.
And so that pursuit of that trifecta, tell you what, that'll slow you down sometimes, but it'll make for a substantially better conversation when you're ready to have it.
For me, well, one, now that I have a lot of lessons with Byron Katie, is that I don't know if it's true, because what do I know? And the second one, I've come a long way in that I don't have to say everything I think. That is a real growth. That I can keep things to myself and just think them and not have to share every stupid thought that comes into my head. So that's the growth. And then also, yeah, if you can say it with kindness, that's good. But I usually stop at the first one because I have learned, is it true? I don't know. That's where I'm at in my journey.
There's that like feelings aren't facts, right? So I have to ask myself, what are the facts? And then is that true?
Yeah.
And does that need to be shared?
Yeah.
And then, yeah, totally with I call it the 15% rule. I only say about 15% of what I think out loud. That's really a public service.
At this ripe age, that's true.
At this advanced age, now that every medical provider I see says, now that you're over 40, I'm like, stop saying that. Now that I'm at this advanced age, I know that only about 15% of what I think should actually exit my lips.
Agreed. I'm so glad I got there. Thank you. You're welcome.
Yes, right. You're welcome.
Just really loved this conversation. Thank you for.
I'm just glad I had the presence of mind to grab a tissue before I sat down. I was like, oh, well, I'm going to cry. That's for sure.
It's a really beautiful thing. I have a girlfriend who cries very easily. Actually, 3 that I know of. And I used to think, get it together. And now I think the exact opposite, that good for you.
Right.
Hell yes. Feeling your emotions, letting them out, not holding them in. Oh my gosh, what a real blessing and gift it is to be an emotional person. I'm so envious actually of you all that just let it go.
Wow. That's an interesting perspective. Okay. I hear that. That's interesting. Right.
It is such a beautiful thing to feel your feelings. I'm really envious. So I'm going to have to go refer to my list of what are feelings.
What am I feeling?
Oh, these are feelings. Well, as I got more work to do.
We all do. Absolutely.
Thank you for joining us for this week's episode of See Beneath Your Beautiful, hosted by Hara Allison. And thanks for your ratings and reviews. We'll be back next week with a new episode. Stay tuned.